from the book of Job. Job spoke, saying, "Is not man's life on earth a drudgery? Are not his days those of hirelings? He is a slave who longs for the shade, a hireling who waits for his wages. So I have been assigned months of misery, and troubled nights have been allotted to me. If in bed I say, 'When shall I rise?' then the night drags on. I am filled with restlessness until the dawn. My days are swifter than a weaver's shuttle. They come to an end without hope. Remember that my life is like the wind. I shall not see happiness again." The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God. A reading from the first letter of St. Paul to the Corinthians. Brothers and sisters, if I preach the gospel, this is no reason for me to boast, for an obligation has been imposed upon me, and woe to me if I do not preach it. If I do so willingly, I have a recompense, but if unwillingly, then I have been entrusted with a stewardship. What then is my recompense? That when I preach, I offer the gospel free of charge, so as not to make full use of my right in the gospel. Although I am free in regard to all, I have made myself a slave to all, so as to win over as many as possible. To the weak, I became weak to win over the weak. I have become all things to all to save at least some. All this I do for the sake of the gospel, so that I too may have a share in it. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark.
Glory to you.
On leaving the synagogue, Jesus entered the house of Simon and Andrew with James and John. Simon's mother-in-law lay sick with a fever. They immediately told him about her. He approached, grasped her hand, and helped her up. Then the fever left her, and she waited on them. When it was evening, after sunset, they brought to him all who were ill or possessed by demons. The whole town was gathered at the door. He cured many who were sick with various diseases, and he drove out many demons, not permitting them to speak because they knew him. Rising very early before dawn, he left and went off to a deserted place where he prayed. Simon and those who were with him pursued him, and on finding him said, "Everyone is looking for you." He told them, "Let us go to the nearby villages that I may preach there also. For this purpose have I come." So he went into their synagogues, preaching and driving out demons throughout the whole of Galilee. The Gospel of the Lord. All right, students in the congregation today, think about it. What's the greatest satisfaction you get from school? Don't worry, I won't call on anybody for the answer. But my guess is that when you have a couple of minutes to think about it, you realize that getting good results from a good effort is really a terrific thing. When you've worked hard at something and then it goes your way, that's beautiful. So when you work hard at studying calculus or something, right? Or you work hard at trying to learn this instrument and then you get picked for the band, or you work hard at training for a certain sport and you get chosen for it. You work hard at Hillsborough High School and learning about robots, and then you're on the robot squad, right? And you study hard in some subject and then you do well, and it's a great thing. Now, if you don't study hard and you do well, there's some satisfaction. If you study hard and you don't do well, there's not much satisfaction. But that satisfaction of studying hard, doing well, trying hard, getting the result you want. And what's one of the greatest bummers? When you're a student and you're trying to keep your train on the track. And for me, when in the experience of being with students, one of the greatest disappointments, the greatest sadness is when you work hard and you don't get the good results, right? When you really tried to study and then it doesn't go your way. And I don't know about you, but when I've had that experience, frequently I want to, I get frustrated and I squawk about the teacher and the other people who worked hard and didn't get good results. They want to squawk about the teacher. And those of you who are teachers know that one of the biggest frustrations is when you're in the presence of a student who has worked hard and they just didn't get where they wanted to go. And you're kind of ready for anything. So this fall, I had, an exceptional bunch of students down at Rutgers, exceptional bunch of students. And the rule was, given the quality of students, if your final average doesn't start with a 9, you're not getting an A. 89.9 doesn't cut it. That's so barbarian, that's so tough, right? It's so creepy to do that. But they understood it, and there was one gal in the class who got 102 on the first exam, did very well on the final, but she had a family turmoil in the middle of the whole thing, and she was missing classes, and she really bombed the second exam. And so it was one of those students where we worked together to try to make up for lost time, share the notes, do all this stuff. And her final average came in exactly at that, at an 89.8. What do you do with that? Well, that's where the line is drawn. And so she wrote, after I submitted grades, and the Rutgers has that very efficient system where you submit the grades on the computer and then they're posted like instantly. And she wrote back and she said, "Dear professor, could you tell me what was my final average?" And there's no good way to tell somebody, you had the highest B+ in the course, aren't you happy? That doesn't go over so big, right? So I said, I hate to tell you this, but you were closer than anybody I've seen in recent years. And it makes me sad not to see you get the A that you worked so hard for. 89.8. So she writes back like 7 seconds later, and I don't know about you, but in my experience, if students write back like 7 seconds later, it's not generally, "God bless you, have a lovely day." That's not usually what it's about. It's usually something you can't share with kids who haven't been confirmed yet, you know what I mean? It's in that category. And she wrote back, and by the way, the irony is this student is related to a parishioner here, which has no bearing on the subject at all, but I just thought that was coincidental. She wrote back instantly and she said, "I understand you had to draw the line someplace. I really enjoyed your class. I hope my roommates get into your section next semester." And I thought either this is a joke or she hates her roommates. I mean, who would do that, right? You work your tail off and you get a B+, but it's a good B+, right? Here's what's remarkable about that. The student who can really come through and in the face of disappointment still be very, very kind. Because when you get to disappointment, you get to the intersection of kind and cranky, right? And it's really a hard left to stay on the kind path because everything about you wants to go in the cranky direction. Anytime that you have that big disappointment, it's so easy to become cranky, and it's such a challenge and such a gift and such a good thing to remain kind, as she did. And that challenge about staying kind when you've been disappointed rather than taking the fork toward cranky, that's in the readings today, and it's a big challenge about our own kindness and our own way of living out our discipleship. Job couldn't be more disappointed in God, and Job has every reason to be disappointed in God. Today we hear from the 7th chapter of Job. Remember, the big action in Job takes place in the first 2 chapters. And in those first 2 chapters, Job's kids are all killed in a big disaster. A volcano blows up his farm and kills all his livestock. The house has fallen down on his family. And that's only chapter 1. And then you get to chapter 2, and Satan comes back and inflicts him with this horrible, horrible skin disease, so there's no posture, and the boils are on the bottom of his feet and every place else. There's no way to escape the pain of these things. And then Job's wife says to him, when he's going through all this, why don't you just curse God and die? And you think Job, given his piety, might say something unpleasant. He is so disappointed in God, and now he's disappointed that his wife isn't supporting him. But he doesn't fire back with some cranky remark. Instead, he explains his position. And then the big challenge comes in. The big challenge comes in because these three friends of his show up, and for 40 chapters, they're trying to tell him, Job, you must have done something wrong. That's the only reason this bad thing could have happened to you. And Job's trying to say, that's not the way God works, and I haven't done anything wrong, so you got to get over your theory. Could you imagine someone trying to go on for 40 chapters to tell you you're a bad person? And how disappointed is he in God and how disappointed in them? And his disappointment comes through in today's reading. My life is drudgery. I'm like a slave seeking the shade. There's nothing fun going on in my life. He's very candid about his disappointment. But time and time again, throughout those 40 chapters of speeches that these other people throw on him, he's continually speaking kindly of God and graciously toward them, trying to make his position known, doesn't lower the boom, doesn't wig out, doesn't blow up. It's a tall order, right? When you've been disappointed by God and the people that you love, to stay on the kind path rather than the cranky path. But Job doesn't. In the gospel, there's a similar story, but I think it takes a little bit of filling in the blanks and a little bit of inference. And I put it to you with this question. Everybody in this church today is a baby of some sort. There are like 6 major baby categories. Some people are food babies. So if you don't my dad was a complete food baby. Had to have 3 meals a day at certain times. My grandfathers on both sides, total food babies. And if you deprived them of 1 meal or switched the meal time, they could get cranky. Other people are weather babies, right? Like if you moved to Norway or to Buffalo and it was cloudy all winter, you'd be a mess. I'm a sleep baby. If I don't get my 17 hours every day, I am a total crank, right? And some of you are sleep babies, right? Everybody's a baby of some sort. Everybody has that one thing in the daily routine where you pull that out of it and it gets a little bit cranky. Now, I'm not saying Jesus was a sleep baby, but just notice the way this passage is set up. He's had his first day in public ministry. That's what this first chapter of Mark is about, the opening days of his public ministry. And so his opening day, he cast out the demon from last week, and then he goes and he cures Peter's mother-in-law, so we get the transition into the end of the first day. And then a very unusual detail creeps into Mark's gospel, that after he cured Peter's mother-in-law, they brought to him after dark. After dark, they kept bringing people to him. Highly unusual. Highly unusual. Notice the way the miracles are wrought in all of the synoptic gospels. How much of the action takes place at night? Not much. And just about nothing in terms of engagement with the public. It all happens in the daylight. But they keep bringing to him these people after dark. And it makes it sound like it went well into the night. And then early the next morning, before sunrise, he gets out to get away from it all, to get some God time, to get some prayer time, to get some connection with the Father. And as soon as he gets out into the wilderness, what happens? Peter shows up. Oh, there you are. We were looking for you. Peter, can't you figure that out? Like, the reason I'm here is so I don't have to be with you right now, huh? There could be a reason to be cranky there. There could be a little bit of disappointment in the fact that they didn't understand his humanity as it was. But what does he say to them? Does he say, get lost, I need some time alone, you guys are a bunch of bubbleheads, I don't understand it, and you don't understand me? No, he says, let us go to the other towns so that I may preach there as well. Once again, in the face of these big demands, Jesus just does the kindest thing humanly possible. My guess is if I were in his shoes, and I don't think it's too much of a stretch to think, I don't think these guys really understand me. And in this passage, it's a little bit subtle. In other passages, it's blatant. It's headlines. They do not understand him as much as he wants to be understood. And yeah, there's got to be some disappointment that comes with that. And still he does the kind thing over and over and over again. So when disappointment puts him at the intersection of kind and cranky, he keeps going with kind. If it were a few weeks from now and the subject of disappointment, kindness, and crankiness came up, the challenge would be, okay, where do you need to get your act together? Where have you been disappointed and you really need to work on it because you're not being kind either to the people who have disappointed you or to people who have nothing to do with that disappointment? But it's the green season, and so the question is different, of course. And that is, where are you getting it right? Where do you continue to be kind to people who maybe in some way or another have disappointed you? And it could be a little bit that your expectations are unrealistic, but it's probably the case that you had realistic and valid expectations, and people maybe have let you down one way or the other. Come on, between parents and kids, it happens on a pretty regular basis. I don't care how picturesque your relationship. There are going to be those moments when, I kind of thought you were going to help me out here. I thought you were going to help me out here. And it didn't happen. And you continue to be kind in that relationship. Absolutely, it happens between spouses on a regular basis, right? That somebody's choice of words or actions or something is a little bit of a disappointment, and you could go in the cranky direction, but you go off in the kind direction. And not to invite bad behavior, but just to be kind as Christ was kind. It happens in the workplace, it happens at school, it happens in athletics, it happens in special activities, extracurricular activities. It happens all the time, and you're doing it, and I would just ask you to notice 2 or 3 ways in which the Lord is giving you that same grace that the Lord gave to Job, that same grace that just shined through Jesus Christ. Even when there's disappointment, you continue to be kind. You don't let the disappointment derail you. You're getting it right. Yeah, the purple season will roll around and we can wonder about where we need to work on it, but sufficient for today is the question thereof. Where are you getting it right that way? And knowing that those situations could go in a different direction, you have to be able to listen to Jesus say, thank you. I know it's a challenge, I know it's not easy, but you are doing exactly what I hoped you would do. You're renewing the face of the earth, you're glorifying me, you're making choices that lead other people to peace. Good for you. And even if it feels like some days you ended up with an 89.8 and a B+, you're keeping after it. Good for you. Where's the Lord saying, stay with that? So you do the right thing. With God's grace, because of God's grace, you're able to get to that intersection of cranky and kind, that intersection to which disappointment delivers you, and you deal with the crankiness in the internal form, as they say, and you're kind to the other, whether it's the person who's disappointed you or not. You could name a half dozen ways in which you're kind when you could be cranky. Name 2 or 3 places in life where the Lord is giving you the grace to do precisely that. Choose kind over cranky, and you're receiving that grace and using it well. When disappointment delivers you to the intersection of kind and cranky. Let us pray.